Hey, and welcome to another edition of Candidate Corner. Today, my guest is Ellen Brabo. Ellen is running for mayor for the city of Washington, North Carolina. I got to say North Carolina because someone could be watching this in anywhere in Washington, D.C. or Washington State, Washington, North Carolina, affectionately known by the locals as the original Washington, right, Ellen? Now, the slang is Little Washington. But the locals don't like Little Washington so much. It is the original Washington. And if you didn't know already, it is the first entity, town, municipality in the U.S. to be named after George Washington. So the original Washington. Ellen, you're running for mayor. So glad to have you on with us today. We got a few questions for you. And the first one is, can you introduce yourself? I know a little bit about you. But for those that may not know who Ellen Brabo is, you've done some interesting things in your life and really cool that has led you to this moment. Tell our audience a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Johnny. I appreciate you having me on today. And I will offer being in the tourism industry, the Little Washington anecdote is something I have fully embraced. Being with a marketing background as well, I mean, you can't beat free advertising. And so when people know you as Little Washington, you just got to take it and run with it. But yeah, so my background, I came to Washington in 2021. I am a military veteran, having served in the U.S. Army after college. And so I had the opportunity to serve primarily overseas, both in South Korea and in Germany. And after transitioning out of the Army during COVID, I made my way back to Washington, D.C.
Now, I want to pause you on that. You went to college. Where did you go to college?
I went to college at SUNY Brockport. It's outside of the Rochester, New York area.
Okay. You went to college and then you went in the Army, but you went in as an officer. And you rose to the rank of captain. Am I right on that?
Correct. Yes.
So in your job in the Army, what did you do in the Army?
So while my MOS was 25 Alpha, which is a signal officer, and that's what the Army trained me to do, I had the opportunity to work instead as a public affairs officer. And so I told the soldier story. I was able to manage social media, use my photography background and skills, and write stories to show the men and women back home what all of our brave service members are doing abroad.
And you were in the Army how long?
5.5 years.
That is awesome. All right, so after the Army, tell us where you went from there.
So after the Army, I did what most veterans do, and I took a job as a government contractor. And so I worked as the strategic communications manager for the Office of Research and Engineering at the Department of Defense, overseeing our modernization portfolio. So
And that was in the big Washington.
It was in the big
DC,
Washington. Yes. Yeah. I was working in DC at the Pentagon, and I had the opportunity to work with some pretty incredible technological intellects, ranging from learning about autonomous systems and hypersonic weapons to directed energy and future G, and just so much incredible technology that is coming out of the Department of Defense and our academic partnerships and industrial partnerships as well. But being able to work in that office for a couple of years and oversee the communications efforts to make sure that both our internal partners and external partners knew what was going on was really incredible opportunity.
So that's fascinating, Ellen. What an amazing opportunity to serve in the Army and what you did. What brought you and led you to Washington, North Carolina, the other Washington, the Little Washington?
The Little Washington.
What led you here? Tell us about that part of your life.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like many people during COVID, I was working fully remote, and that really opened the doors to exploring what do I want my life to look like and what other opportunities might be out there beyond the traditional 9 to 5. And when I had transitioned out of the Army, I completed the Boots to Business transition program, which is for service members who want to go on to become an entrepreneur. And through that program, I had built out a business plan to create an Airbnb concept for military families in transition. So military families lost tens of thousands of dollars due to strict cancellation policies from Airbnb during COVID. And that's a whole rabbit hole. And so thankfully, there are a lot of great partners out there who have seen that need and are working on developing that concept. But for me, it led me to want to understand the business model of Airbnb and looking at different places in the US where that investment could be made. And didn't think it was going to work out. I'll be honest. I looked at properties in Texas and in Ohio and came back to DC, and a girlfriend from high school and I had lunch together, and she was like, I wouldn't give up that easily. And the next morning she sent me a Facebook post, and it was the Bowers Trip House in Washington, North Carolina.
Wow.
And I immediately contacted the realtor on the listing, asked some questions in regards to the code and what would be possible with the property and could it be converted into a B&B. And that was a Friday morning, and by Sunday afternoon, my parents and I were touring the Bowers Trip House, and by Wednesday, I was under contract. It was just one of those things where, the first place we went when we got to town was Parlay, and Sonny Fields was playing his guitar on the porch, and you're looking at the waterfront and you're like, wow, this is cool. Like, I could see a life here. But the moment we stepped in the house, it was one of those things you just feel in your soul, in your bones. And I was like, this is it. This is where I want to be. And the realtor, I asked her, would this be a place that values community over competition? I don't want to be a come here that's fighting day after day to be here. And she was like, no, we really value community here in Washington. And that is something I have felt every step of the way from my first day here in Washington.
So with your Airbnb, it's known as the L Hotel. It's been very community oriented. I mean, there's a lot of community things that you've done as a part of that. You probably had no idea how involved that would be in the community, hosting different gatherings, small groups, and just little meet and greets and just different things. And it's been a real blessing to the community. What's that been like for you? It's given you a real platform to get to know and meet people that without that you may have not met as quickly as you have without being a part of this Airbnb concept that you had.
Yeah, absolutely. It has been incredible opportunity and a great pillar for me to be able to meet a lot of people in the community. And one of the things I did recently when I made the offer on the property, the sellers had asked for a video to kind of articulate who I was and what my vision was for the space. I know they received multiple offers, and I went back and rewatched that video. I hadn't sat down and done that since 2021. And in that video, 27-year-old Ellen is talking about, wanting to create a pillar of the community and have open doors and host events and Christmas parties and create opportunity for the home to be filled with love and laughter and joy again. And I feel very proud that I have been able to do that, but it is not by us being in a silo. The only reason I have been able to find success in creating the El Hotel and that brand is for the community of support around me. And, being a member of the Chamber of Commerce, that was one thing my grandfather told me right when I got to Washington was like, you need to join the chamber, and being able to jump in and take their leadership Beaufort program. Yeah. And be able to meet so many incredible people, but also understand the inner workings of both the city and the county, our nonprofit community. The list goes on. It's a very valuable course that I really am grateful I was able to take advantage of when setting up my business.
So you just mentioned getting to learn the inner workings of the county and the city, and you got to learn some things that probably took you a little bit by surprise. Something that I know led you to that, as we've talked about, was you begin to see this proposal for the 15th Street expansion. Everyone knows something needs to be done with 15th Street. It can be a bottleneck and there's no turn lane. We get all of that. But you begin to see some proposals that were being put out there, and you begin to talk with some folks in the community, and you could see how this was going to impact. There was a proposal with the DOT and the city coordinating together. You felt like some voices needed to be heard. And did you spearhead the 15th Street Coalition? Was that did you spearhead that yourself, or what was that? Tell us how that got started. And then that led you to discover some things with the city that, though you love the charm of Washington, you're like, man, there's some inner workings going on and how the city is operated and managed that needs attention. That one thing led to another. So take us down that road, if you will, Ellen.
Yeah. So in 2023, I campaigned for city council here in Washington. And through that year, I met with some residents who had expressed their concerns to me and educated me on the background for the 15th Street project. And so that 15th Street project dates back to 1997, which is something I think a lot of residents maybe don't even realize. And it was part of the 2000 thoroughfare plan of needing improvements. And that has just unfortunately continued to evolve while nothing has been done to address the safety considerations of the corridor. And so the residents that had been very engaged and very involved and outspoken against the DOT's version of the solution sat me down, gave me some background, and they asked if I'm elected to city council, would I please keep them in the know if this project comes back on the table. And so earlier, while I was not elected to city council, I do take that responsibility very seriously that people did vote for me. And you don't have to be elected to be engaged civically in your community. And so in January this year, the public notice from NCDOT came across the news desk at the Washington Daily News. It was going to be published for the February 6th meeting. And I reached out to a couple of constituents that I knew were concerned about the project to see if they had heard any updates. Had anyone from the city reached out to them to let them know that this was back on the table? And no one had. They had no idea. And so I felt like it was an obligation, but also as a resident of Washington, I wanted to be part of that conversation. And so I attended the February 6th public input session there at the Church of God, I think it is, on 15th Street. And I was blown away at the amount of errors in the proposal, but also in just the scale of the project. And it seemed like from everything I was seeing in February that the project that the city had voted against not once but twice was being brought back again on even a larger scale. And that to me seems problematic. And so from there, things just kind of evolved. It was getting other people together that had already been previously engaged, putting together a website and presenting at city council that, hey, there's a responsibility here for you to look at these things more deeply. And if we're catching errors, why are we being presented these proposals that are filled with these types of errors? What are we missing? What are the deeper things going on here that we're not paying attention to? And unfortunately, through that process, in myself and others of the coalition reaching out to our representatives, they were either unresponsive or flat outright told us, no, we don't need to meet with you. We only had one city council member respond back to us and meet with us, and we're very grateful for that. But it really led me to feeling very frustrated that representatives are not being representative of the people that they were elected by. And so by April, we put together a petition, and more than 600 people in Washington have signed that petition saying, no, we do not want this project. We presented that petition on April 12th at the city council meeting with a pinpoint map with every name and every address so that the city council members could see this is not in my backyard issue. This is a citywide, countywide issue where residents are saying we don't want our neighborhood reshaped in this way. More than 40 homes and businesses will be lost to this project. What's the benefit? So we can push cars through town as quickly as possible. Cars being pushed through town don't spend money in town. And there are better solutions. Communities across the country are trying to undo these types of projects because of the devastation that has happened to their communities. And yet here we are behind the 8 ball trying to put something like this in. And I think Washington deserves best practice. We deserve industry standard. We don't deserve something less than just because we're a rural community.
You obviously had run for city council, and so Ellen, who moves to Washington, and what year did you move to Washington? That
2021.
was 2021. Not that you're trying to, but a name is being made. I mean, you're showing up on people's radar, not in a very positive way, I may add, but because you were spearheading this 15th Street coalition, it's almost like you came under the ire of maybe city council, the offices there, mayor office that would govern our city. What did that look like? How did that show up? Did you feel that? Was that a real thing? And then we're going to just tie this in directly with the whole El Hotel thing because it is the elephant in the room. It seems like that's parlayed into some things there. Can you give us an overview of that whole experience? What is this about?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard not to feel like it's ironic, or because I don't believe in irony. I think, everything happens there. I don't know. It's not ironic. That, April 12th, I speak out at a city council meeting, or maybe it was April 14th, city council meeting. I speak out on behalf of the 15th Street Coalition, present a petition, and then 2 days later, the city sends me a notice to my business. I would have liked to have seen city resources. If we're willing to use resources to this extent, I think we should have been able to use them towards engaging with the community on 15th Street, as opposed to putting your head in the sand and pretending the problem is just going to go away. So The timing is not ironic, and I think it's very unfortunate. But I think if you take it a year back further to March of 2024, I think it's really disappointing that the City of Washington Planning Board and the City of Washington City Council um, felt it was acceptable to change the city code by which bed and breakfasts operate without consulting and including us in the conversation. If they can do it to my business industry, they can do it to yours.
So there are only 4 bed and breakfasts that operate in the city. So how hard would it have been for the city to reach out to those folks to be a part of that conversation? It seems odd and puzzling.
It seems very odd and puzzling. It shouldn't be hard to pick up the phone. I think about the fact that the city, in the manner of 2 weeks, mailed me 12 notices in regards to the code violations that they submitted to me in May. But last year, when they changed the code, I didn't even get so much as a letter in the mail or a call on the phone to be part of the conversation. If someone's complaining about my business or the other bed and breakfasts in town, we should know about that.
So you're not even notified about a code changing, but 2 days after you share concerns about the 15th Street project, over a period of a few days, you get 12 notices of violations.
Yes. Yeah. And I find it, I mean, it really is mind-boggling given that our Harriet Tubman Day tea party for the Open Door Women's Shelter in March was on the front cover of the newspaper. We're not secretive. I'm not secretive about anything that we're doing at the hotel. We are very engaged on social media. We're very grateful for the support of the Washington Daily News. If something that we were doing or operating in some capacity was a detriment to the neighborhood or a concern to the city, I think there's been a lot of other opportunities in which that could have been addressed. But we hosted our first event in December of 2021, long before we opened our doors to the community and had our grand opening. And I think it's just it's a disservice to the residents of Washington when your city leaders aren't willing to engage the stakeholders in the conversations, because they're the ones in the industry. They're the ones who understand the ins and the outs. And so, I mean, one of the examples I will offer is the city code for bed and breakfasts now says we're only allowed to have 1 part-time staff member, but not a single member on city council or the planning board owns or operates a bed and breakfast. How are you able to tell me how many staff it takes to successfully operate my business? Our economic development goals for a rural agricultural community has always been job creation. Why would you want to limit job creation? It just doesn't make any sense. It feels very counterintuitive to other stated objectives, and it's hard to understand what that thought process was when changing the code like that.
So this all culminates in this 7-hour hearing that happened on a weeknight when you were brought before the planning zoning board because there's the threat of them revoking your license to operate your business. And I saw you turn and look to people in the audience. These were some people around the neighborhood that had seemed to be complaining about some things like maybe parking or whatever. But you turned and looked to folks and you said, I never heard from you. Like I didn't know this was an issue. If so, you could have come to me at any moment. I've got an open door. I would have been glad to come up with something. Just from what I've gotten to know about you, Ellen, like you're not just a bull in a china shop type of person. You really love people and you want to work with people. It seemed like it would have been such an easier thing to let's get together. You got some concerns. If you've got some questions, let's come up with something that works for all. But instead, there seemed to be this forceful, heavy-handed thing. And as I watched the 7 hours, I mean, we didn't go to bed till after 1:30 in the morning that night. I kept saying to my wife, the amount of effort the city has put into building a case against you to find these neighbors, to find these witnesses. It's like, would it have just been so much easier to sit down with Ellen and the owners of these Airbnb bed and breakfast entities and sit down and work out some solutions? It's like, at the end of the day, are you for business or are you against business as the city? But there was a smell to the whole thing. It just didn't feel right. There were some things that didn't pass the smell test. It just seems so odd for the viewer watching that. So help us land this plane. Like, where does that land? where is it at now in the process, and give us an update on that again.
Yeah, I mean, it should have been a neighbor conversation. It should have been a neighbor conversation last year in March if the city had received a complaint in regards to any bed and breakfast. That's where we should have started. And essentially, that's where the 7 hour meeting ended, was the stakeholders should get together with the city and have a conversation to what the text amendment should have been and should look like by which we operate bed and breakfasts in our community. And so that is something that is now being asked of us, and something we'll have to navigate in the coming months with the city, and propose back before city council, to see if they will support a text amendment to the way by which we operate bed and breakfasts here in Washington. The interesting is that I don't think maybe a lot of people picked up on either through that hearing process is, those violation notices were received by myself in May, retained an attorney, submitted the petition to appeal in June, and the Board of Adjustment has 60 days to schedule that hearing. And so that 60-day mark, that hearing, was scheduled for August 14th. And I had not had the opportunity to appeal the zoning violation before the city submitted the request to revoke my permit. It's hard not to take that as the city trying to shut down a business when that is literally what they tried to do to me before I ever had the opportunity to appeal the violations. And so if I had gone before the Board of Adjustment, appealed my zoning violations, and then continued to be non-compliant for whatever the decision may be, or the board could have said, you know what, we don't think you're in violation of anything because you're operating under the code in which we gave you the permit. It could have gone either way, but we didn't get to see that opportunity take place.
It's almost like some steps were skipped to get to the point where we're going to have a hearing to shut down your business.
Correct. And I think for myself, I mean, I can only speak for my experiences, but it makes you wonder how others are being treated and what other businesses or residents in our community are the steps being skipped. Why are we essentially getting all the way to 100 without seeing how we can resolve things at step 1?
Totally understand that. So again, your plans for running for mayor happened before that marathon hearing. We get that. What led you to the place where you felt like, I want to run for mayor? There's a need for this, and I want to get involved. Give us some reasons, maybe your top 3 reasons as to why you feel like you are running for mayor, and what the purpose would be of your winning. Like, what would you bring to Washington if you become mayor?
I think first and foremost for myself, something that I've really had a front row seat to this year has been the lack of transparency and the lack of open governance currently taking place at the city of Washington. And I think it's a disservice to the residents that live here. It's 2025. Transparency, communication, all of that, it's not hard. It should be very easy for residents to know what's happening, when it's happening, and why it's happening. And my experience, presenting at city council meetings and speaking at city council meetings this year has really lent itself to feeling like I'm talking to a wall, that there doesn't seem to be any follow-up or care or consideration for those who are speaking at city council meetings. And there's no two-way dialogue taking place. And neighborhoods are being reshaped without the neighbors that live there getting to have a say in what that looks like. And 15th Street is just one example. But that April City Council meeting, I mean, you had no scheduled public appearances on the agenda. You had no agenda item pertaining to 15th Street. And after nearly 15 residents got up during public comment to speak and voice concerns regarding the project, suddenly the chairman of the RPO has a 45-minute prepared presentation with slides. Your city manager has a slide and a presentation prepared. Your director of public safety just happens to have a folder on hand with speed data from a 15th Street speed study last year. None of that was accidental, and it's a complete disservice to the residents of Washington to not be transparent about what's taking place. People should have been able to know that those presentations were going to be provided, and they should have been included on the agenda. And if they weren't, on the agenda in advance, the city council could have simply made an amendment at the start of the meeting, and anyone that was watching live online that wanted to make an effort to turn the TV off and come down to City Hall should have had the right to do that. And instead, that has just become the status quo by which the city government is operating. And I really believe that with my communications background, I can help bring us into the 21st century on how we're communicating and being transparent about what we're doing. We could have quarterly town halls. There should be a regular weekly newsletter coming out of the mayor's office There should be a podcast for the city for residents to understand easy, digestible updates about what's taking place, when it's taking place, and why it's taking place.
You speak of effective communications. I heard one of the employees of the city talk about how, well, we put out a notice in the newspaper that we're going to have this hearing on changing the code for Airbnb. And I'm thinking, it's 2025. How many people read a newspaper? If you want to put information out where the public is watching today, it's social media. There's other things to do. It's like, is government doing some of these things just to cover their tracks or to check the box? Or are they really putting in an effort to have open dialogue with the citizens? And I feel like that's not happening. It really isn't happening. So that moves us to another thing, and it's the sheer amount of debt and the lack of fiscal responsibility. I had some numbers presented to me, and that is in 2022, the city of Washington had a debt amount of $1.4 million. Sounds like a lot, but I mean, it is what it is. From 2022 to now, we are at a $22 million debt for the city of Washington. We're talking over $21 million in debt that have been incurred to the city in such a short period of time, in 3 years. Like, what in the world is going on? And what can you do to help with this craziness in spending? Along with that is property taxes. Our home in the city of Washington, our house payment has gone up significantly. We called our insurance company to say, has our insurance gone up? And come to find out, it is our property taxes that are just literally going through the roof. And it almost feels like it's and we're managing it, but for folks that can't manage that, senior citizens, those on fixed incomes that are experiencing such high increase in property taxes, it's like, what is going on that's causing us to go from 1.4 million in debt as a city to 22 million, and as a result, see property taxes go through the roof?
It doesn't feel like there's any fiscal responsibility when you see numbers like that.
Am I right on that?
1.4
to 22 million?
Yeah, we were just under 1.4 million in 2022, and even 2024's numbers, we were sitting at closer to 9 million, and that is insane. I don't know about you, Johnny, but I was raised, if you don't have money, you don't spend it. And I get that there are some elements of business debt. I'm a business owner and things like that. But a lot of those loans, if you look at them, they're publicly available in the budget. We're talking 6% interest rates, 13% interest rates.
Wow.
I can't understand how that would be a fiscally responsible decision to make. And if we don't have, and that's where communication comes into play, right? If your residents are asking for something, I will offer the splash pad. I love to take my nieces to the splash pad when they're in town, and I think it's great. I think that's a cool community resource that we've been able to provide. However, we didn't financially have the money to provide it. That is a loan that the city took to build the splash pad, and that is now part of our debt that we're making payments on with interest. If you don't have the money to do something, communicate to the constituents that are asking for the resource that I don't have the money to do this right now, but this is how we're going to budget for it.
And you could even create some fundraising opportunities for people to get involved and help support a project here or there as needed versus going into debt to do it.
Absolutely. One of the ideas that I had a resident offer to me, and I'll be honest, I don't know if it's something that we do require of developers, but something that she had seen often in other communities she's lived in is, if a big developer wants to come in and put in 300 homes, they should be putting in these community resources or contributing towards them. Could that cost have been offset with something like that? I don't know. I think that we have to be willing to look outside the box. And taking on $22 million in debt does not seem like a responsible thing to be doing. Maybe we can pay it now. But Western North Carolina, I think, has shown us a lot of things that we could be doing to be better prepared for our future, being in a state that is impacted by natural disasters. And I would hate to see the city of Washington not be prepared for our future because of irresponsible decisions being made.
So the reality of those watching is the debt is going through the roof. There is what seems to be a lack of accountability and transparency in our city government. And it seems obvious. I mean, it just really does. These are facts. This isn't hyperbole. These are facts. Are there any other concerns or any other thoughts? I know there's a couple other candidates that are running for city council. Um, Joe Davis, am I right?
Yeah, you have
Nick Fritz. These are
yep.
guys who are promising, hey, if you elect us to the city council, we're going to reduce these property taxes and get a hold of this spending. Um, Speak into that, and then any other thoughts, concerns that you have as to reasons why you're running for mayor.
Absolutely. And I will offer Zach Setawong is a great candidate for city council as well, with some really good ideas about fixed property tax rates for senior citizens and those that are working on fixed incomes or living on fixed incomes. And so I think I would really encourage residents to be paying attention to who your city council candidates are. There are some really great candidates out there. And you can make a change for mayor, but you have to make a change for council too, if you want to see things different for the future of Washington.
It requires both.
It requires both, right? And that partnership, along with the city, their city employees, the city staff, we should be working as a team. And the culture of the team should, in my mind, be how do we get to yes? How do we get to yes on projects, on solutions, on solving problems? And I'm having a reputation of being good for business in our city government. But I would offer a couple other things. I mean, obviously, property taxes is something we touched on. I'm a real estate investor, but I also think it's counterintuitive to housing affordability goals and objectives when you continue to put your rent prices out of reach for the working class here in Washington. We have rent prices that are very high comparative to areas like Greenville. And I think that we should be thinking about, if you can't say you're looking for housing affordability and then do your actions are counterintuitive to that. And landlords are just going to pass those fees on to the tenant. So who do we continue to price out living here in Washington?
So in other words, because property taxes are going through the roof, rents are having to be raised. I mean, so basically the cost of living within the city. So it's not just the fault of the landlords. Like, they're forced to pass this on to folks renting because the cost of their property is just skyrocketing. Am I right on that?
Yeah, exactly. And I understand a reevaluation needed to take place, but I do think that the city could have done better to certainly, I mean, revenue neutral would have been a very easy baseline to protect the residents, as opposed to not going revenue neutral. I think another one that I would offer through the 15th Street project, I did a lot of reading and research, reading our bike plan, our pedestrian plan, the CAMA land use plan. We have some really well thought out plans. Unfortunately, they haven't been updated since 2016 for most of them, but I understand that, I mean, the city spent tens of thousands of dollars. They received grants for some of these plans. We have the 2009 reinvestment strategy. They're not being followed. And so I was very disappointed when I asked at the community college meeting, why for 15th Street, this doesn't align with our pedestrian plan. This doesn't align with our bike plan. To be told, well, they're just plans. We don't have to follow them. And I disagree. I mean, if we don't have a plan for where we're going, how do we know how to get there? And I would love to see Washington be a bikeable, walkable community from 15th Street all the way to the waterfront. We should be able to bike and walk safely, to navigate. It breaks my heart when I see the motorized wheelchairs up and down 15th Street and Carolina Avenue without a safe space to be able to navigate. You should be able to walk to the grocery store. You should be able to hop on your bike and get downtown if you so choose. And I think some of that would alleviate the stress of parking downtown, if people could easily navigate by foot and by bike safely here within the city of Washington.
Any closing thoughts? And I do want to cover one thing before we finish. Any other finishing thoughts, closing thoughts as to why you feel like you are the best candidate for mayor for the city of Washington?
That's a really good question. I think at the end of the day, I hope people will vote where they feel that they are going to receive honest and respectful answers and responses, transparent responses with integrity. And I hope that people will, when they look to my campaign, that is what they'll see. I might not be able to solve every problem. I am one person, but I will always be honest about where we stand. I will be transparent about the decisions that are being made, and I will always strive to be representative of the community and the voice of the residents here in Washington.
That's awesome. Well, Ellen, thank you. So how can folks learn more? We know that the election for mayor is November 4th. Early voting starts October the 16th. So that's not very far away from right now when this is being aired. how can people get involved in your campaign? How can they learn more? How can people get a T-shirt, a yard sign? How can they be a part of this?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a website, ellenbrabo.com. You can visit the website and you can find information about my campaign. You can request a yard sign. You can buy a shirt. You can sign up to join the email newsletter. If you're interested in being engaged with the campaign as a volunteer in some capacity, you can certainly email me. My email is ellen@ellenbrabo.com. And I will offer, Johnny, because it's a question I continue to get. Nowhere on my website will you see an affiliation for the Democratic or the Republican Party. I am an independent candidate, and I would encourage people to be mindful that it is a nonpartisan election. And so I would look at the whole candidate. What do they represent that is going to affect your quality of life? Because local government can have a lot of impact on what your day-to-day looks like.
Well, with that said, too, probably as more than anything, I mean, federal is big, but the cities by which you live in, the counties by which you live in, that really plays a big part in your day-to-day life, as you said. So, Ellen, people can also make a donation to your website as well to help support your campaign.
Yes, yeah, no, financial contributions to any campaign are they're what we need to keep running,
Yes.
to get our name out there. And so I would say yes, if you are willing to donate, you can do so at ellenbrabo.com. We have a way to donate online, or if you'd like to write a check. You can make a check payable to the committee to elect Ellen Brabo, and that can be dropped off to Stephen Wood at Bergal Insurance. And I will also offer you can follow the campaign on Facebook, Ellen Brabo for Mayor of Washington.
And there's an address where people can mail a check as well. Am I right on that?
Yes, yep, that's also on the website as well.
Perfect. All right. Ellen, thank you for joining us. Folks, do your research. Learn about the mayoral race of Washington, North Carolina, the city council. It's obvious some changes need to be made. Again, going from 1.4 million in debt in 2022 to 22 million in debt in 2025. Wow, I'm just speechless. So do your research, pray about it, and you vote where you feel like you are supposed to vote. So, Ellen, thank you for joining
Thank you, Johnny.
us. Stay tuned for our next edition of Candidate Corner.